Today we are going to talk about the reaction with water. How do metals react with water? Now, under normal conditions, metals react with water to form metal oxide. But along with that, it releases hydrogen gas. That is how they normally react. And these metal oxides can further combine with water to form metal hydroxide. So basically, when we put a metal into water, it will immediately form metal oxide and some hydrogen gas, and then metal oxide in turn react with the water again and form metal hydroxide. So by the end, you will receive metal hydroxide. Okay, but the important point here is that all metals do not react with water. Now we are going to talk about some of the metals and we will see how they react with water. So let's first consider the metal sodium. Sodium is very reactive, as we know about it. Sodium reacts vigorously very fast with oxygen, with water. Even if sodium is exposed to a little bit of water, it can catch fire. Therefore, in chemistry labs, what happens? All these metals are um, stored in with special care, because if you leave it exposed to air, it will catch fire. If you put it into water or by any chance moisture come in contact with sodium, potassium, they will catch fire. So question is, how do we store sodium and potassium so that they will not react with air, they will not react with water, they will not catch fire? So sodium, potassium, in fact, they are stored inside kerosene oil because there is no air, no water, so there is no reaction. So that is how sodium is stored, and you should be extra careful while you handle sodium. Now, what would be the reaction when sodium reacts with water? So sodium combines with water and it will form metal oxide, NaOH. This is the sodium hydroxide, plus hydrogen gas will get released. Okay. But this metal oxide, it means sodium hydroxide, it will again react with water and finally it will form metal hydroxide, that is sodium hydroxide. Okay. Here I have shown the last substance, last material which we get, that is sodium hydroxide. Okay. So what would be the final product? That is, one is hydrogen gas that will be released and the second is metal hydroxide. Okay. So I have written the final reaction here. And in this case, sodium hydroxide is formed and hydrogen gas will be released and lot of heat energy is released. Now the heat energy which is released in this reaction is so much that this hydrogen gas which is released catches fire, and that is why if it comes in contact with moisture or water, sodium catches fire because very large amount of heat energy is released. So in this case, this water is the normal cold water. Even little bit contact with water can actually result in fire with sodium. So similarly, if you look at the reaction with potassium, so what happens? Potassium reacts with water, again the cold water it is, and water is here is liquid, and we will get potassium hydroxide, that is KOH, plus hydrogen gas will be released and heat energy. Okay, and hydrogen gas is the gaseous form, sodium hydroxide NaOH and potassium hydroxide KOH, they are in aqueous form, it's watery solution form, and water is a liquid. So because of so much of reactivity, sodium and potassium are always stored in kerosene so that it cannot react either with oxygen or with water. So this is how these metals react, but that doesn't mean that all the metals react so vigorously with water. In fact, some of the metals will not react at all. So let's look at one more example, say the example of calcium. So calcium reacts with water. Again, it's a cold water and forms calcium hydroxide, CaOH2 plus hydrogen gas. But in this case, reaction is not as violent as sodium, as potassium. So the reaction is less violent and the heat energy released in this case is not that much that it can catch fire. So less amount of heat energy is released during this reaction. But here also calcium can react with cold water. Okay, so these are some metals which react with cold water. But there are also some metals which do not react with cold water. But when you heat the water, they tend to react. So the one of them is magnesium. So when magnesium reacts with water, what happens? Here in this case, it depends. If the water is cold, magnesium does not react. Okay, so if you put magnesium in cold water, nothing will happen. There will be no reaction at all. But instead of cold water, if you put some hot water, then reaction takes place and magnesium hydroxide will be formed. Okay, so let's look at some other sets of metals. The next metal is aluminium and iron. Let's see how do they react with water. Now these metals, they do not react with cold water. It means aluminum and iron will not show any reaction with cold water. So let's try with hot water, as in case of magnesium, right? As in case of magnesium, that magnesium reacts hot with hot water, right? But in this case, aluminum and iron, they do not even react with hot water. Now instead of hot water, if we take steam, that's boiling water, then it reacts. So reaction is somewhat like this. Aluminum, it reacts with water, actually steam, that's the gaseous form of water, okay, and it will form aluminium oxide, that's Al2O3 plus hydrogen gas will be formed. So similarly, iron reacts with steam and will form ferric oxide, that's Fe3O4, and hydrogen is released. Again, if we consider metals like copper, lead, silver, gold. Now, how do they react with water? They do not react with water at all. Whether it's cold water, hot water, or steam, they do not react at all. So, what did we conclude based on our study or reaction of different metals with water? We see that it really depends from one metal to another. Some metals are so vigorous, they react very fast with water. Some react with cold water. Some react only with hot water. Some react only with steam. And some do not react at all. So we saw that metals like sodium and potassium, they react with cold water itself. And that is so vigorously that they catch fire. Whereas metals like calcium, they react with cold water, but it's not that vigorous or it's less violent. There's no fire at all. Next, we talked about magnesium. It does not react with cold water, but it reacts with hot water. Next comes aluminum and iron. They do not react even with hot water. They react with only with steam. And finally, the metals like copper, silver, gold, lead, these metals do not react with water in any form. So the metals vary this much in their reactivity with the same substance. Now we will see how do non-metals react with water. You will be surprised to know that non-metals do not react with water. If you take carbon, sulfur, nitrogen, they do not react with water at all. In fact, those non-metals which are highly reactive with oxygen. If you take a phosphorus, that's a non-metal, and if whenever phosphorus is exposed to air, what happens? It is highly reactive. It combines with oxygen and form oxides of phosphorus. But at the same time, it doesn't react with water at all. Therefore, phosphorus is stored in water to prevent its reaction with oxygen. Okay, so this is how we store phosphorus. Okay, inside we have phosphorus. Okay, and we learn now that phosphorus is so reactive. If it's exposed to air, it can catch fire very easily. So to prevent that, it's stored inside water. Okay, and here it doesn't react with water. Okay, because non-metals do not react with water. So this is the another difference between non-metals and metals. See, metals react with water and non-metals do not react with water. Okay, thank you.